Hello students. I wanted to go over the right side of the measurements of this board. We talked about the wheel before, and I put a module in there about this large one that we did and measured it all out. So that's what's on the left side over here. So you should have that marked off on your board. Before we have our first meeting on Zoom, where I'm going to show you how to set up your palette live as a group, we're actually all going to set up our palette together. That's really key for the rest of the semester. Once we've set up the palette, you won't be using probably any paint. But anyway, I'll go over that then. And then, so we're going to fill in the color wheel. We're going to do some scales, some even wash practice. All of that should happen on our first Zoom session. So I want you to have this ready to go. It's a 15 by 20 piece of watercolor paper. So it's 20 across and 15 up and down. We've already used half of it. So this side of it is 10 by 15. Now we're going to address this other side. It's a little confusing, I think, to set it up, but we'll see. It's not too bad. We mentioned that this is divided here, and this is divided here. So it's split in half. So that gives us 5, 5, 7.5, 7.5. This part on the top, you can go ahead and erase. So this whole half is 1, and we're not going to deal with that right this second. So the top of that you're going to leave blank. Now we're going to break up the bottom. That's going to be where we do our scales. And the scales need to be 1.5 inches tall. That way it'll work for the project that we're going to do. I'm going to put a small 1/2 inch border between each scale so that they're not touching when we do it. We're also going to put a 1/2 inch border on the sides of this area so that we don't go off the edge there either. The top part doesn't matter, it's going to just go right into here. So we're going to start by doing a 1 inch border all the way around, just from here down. It's very narrow, 1/2 inch border, measuring it on your yardstick. So it's going to look like from here, that middle piece, to here. So this is 1/2 inch. It's right in between the two here. So 1/2 inch, pretty narrow area, and this whole side is a 1/2 inch. It's going to run into here anyway because it's all empty in the corner, but it's just so it's consistent. And then stop when you get halfway. We'll do the same thing over here. 1/2 inch. And then on the bottom, across, 1/2 inch. Those are just the three, sides and the bottom. So that is 1/2 inch. That is 1/2 inch. And then that is 1/2 inch. Now each of our scales are going to be 1.5 tall. So starting with the corner, not the corner of the board, but the corner where you just made the border of 1/2 and 1/2, we're going to travel up 1.5 inches. So it's halfway between 1 and 2. The goal is to fit 4 scales in here. And since 1/2 of 15 is 7.5, you don't really need to deal with this part, but just for my own reference, that's 7.5. And within 7.5, I want to get 4 scales of 1.5. So I'm going to have 4 scales totaling 6 inches. That leaves me 1.5 inches left over for borders. So once you go up 1.5, you're going to make a 1/2 inch border between, it's not a border, but it's the separation of 1/2 inch between scales. Then we're going to go up another 1/2 inch. This is the border of 1/2 inch, and then 1.5, and then a 1/2 inch, and then again 1.5, 1/2 inch in between, And that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, and this also is 1.5. The only difference on this one is when you get to the top of the 4 scales, you don't need to make another border because we're going to be doing something in that area anyway. So what we end up with is 1/2 inch border, kind of like use this half of the board all by itself so you don't even think about that. 1/2 inch border that ends there, 1/2 inch border that ends there. Each of these is 1.5 tall, and then a 1/2 inch border between each of these. So as you get to this part, you've traveled 3, 6, 3, 6, and then 7, and then 8. So it's a little slightly above half. But this is going to be the area where we do even wash. In this whole area, you're going to invent some shapes. Some will go off the edge. Some will be very large. Some will be very small. Some geometric, some organic, some long. Couple off the edge. They're not overlapping. Any shapes that you want. With this size, you won't get more than 4. What we'll be able to do, since this wheel has extra space here, is if you want, you can have your shapes cross over as well, or fit one here and there. But as long as you have some in here, then we'll be ready to go. So we have our even wash area. We have 4 scales divided by 1/2 inch. They're 1.5 inch tall with a 1/2 inch border. And then we have our color wheel over here. If you have any issues with that, I'm going to put this on the module so you can see the measurements. And then we'll all be ready to go on our first session. We're going to set up the palette and get this one done, and this will be our first project. Anytime you have a project where you don't like how it turned out, just do it again at any time. You can always redo a project that's not going well before we get to the midterm, or just redo it afterwards. This one in particular, people redo, because it's hard to get it to look good when you're just learning, and it's not expected that you're going to do a great job with it. But we'll do it together, and I look forward to meeting all of you. And I'll make sure we get the dates worked out so we know not only when we're meeting for the first session, but for each critique that we have for every project. See you soon. Bye.